My name is Aaron Fletcher. I'm 38 years old, and I was told to sit with the kids at my cousin's engagement party, like I was a background prop in a family photo I never asked to be in. But that moment, that was just the final straw. You see, in my family, I was never the golden one. That role belonged to my younger sister Haley, bubbly, charming, the fun one who could do no wrong even while doing absolutely nothing. My older brother Dean, he was the responsible firstborn, always praised for his steady job and family of 4. And me, I was the filler, the tag-along, the errand runner, the babysitter, the extra hand at Christmas who got the "Oh, Aaron's here, how nice" while they looked past me to ask if Haley was bringing dessert. Growing up, I didn't see it for what it was. I thought being quiet and helpful was love. I thought paying for groceries when mom forgot her wallet meant I was useful. I thought being the shoulder to cry on, the one who dropped everything to drive Haley home from bad dates or lend Dean a few hundred until Friday, meant I mattered. But love in my family came with a price tag, and the currency was obedience and silence. When Dad passed, things unraveled fast. I was 23, fresh out of college with student loans and a teaching job I adored. Haley was living with mom rent-free to help her cope, which meant shopping online all day while mom poured wine and whispered about what a burden I made of myself by asking for my half of the life insurance payout. Dean swooped in with spreadsheets and advice about managing the estate, which somehow ended with his name on mom's deed and my name on exactly nothing. I didn't fight back. I just kept showing up. Birthdays, graduations, I brought gifts, paid for catering, booked the venues. When Dean's wife had twins, I took a week off work to babysit unpaid. Of course, when Haley got her 5th dream job, I bought her a blazer and told her she could do it, even when she quit 6 weeks later and blamed her toxic work environment. But nothing prepared me for the day my cousin Brielle announced her engagement, and I got the invite not from a call or card, but from a forwarded group email with the subject line, "Family RSVP, don't be late. No personal note, no hope you can make it. Aaron." Just logistics, just expectation. I almost didn't go, honestly. I should have listened to that voice in my gut telling me to skip it and stay home with my rescue cat and a bottle of wine, but some naive part of me thought maybe this time would be different. The venue was upscale, all marble floors and chandeliers. I wore a plum wrap dress and heels that pinched. I even got my nails done. I showed up early, like always, and was handed a color-coded wristband by the hostess. "Buffet seating, you're on the youth list," she said with a practiced smile, pointing toward a side room where tweens were already digging into chicken tenders. I blinked. There must be a mistake. I'm Aaron Fletcher. I'm 38. She checked the list, tapped the page. Fletcher, youth list. It says here, table 6, next to the entertainment corner. Entertainment corner. I followed her finger. A folding table with mismatched chairs, right next to the balloon artist and the hired magician. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe it was a joke. Maybe someone would come out laughing, say gotcha and lead me to my real seat. But then I saw them. My mom, Dean, Haley, all at the head table with champagne flutes in hand, chatting up the groom's family like they were the royal court. I walked over cautiously, and my mom barely looked up. "Oh good, you made it," she said. "You're with the other singles, over there." She gestured vaguely toward the kiddie table, her tone clipped, like I was a mistake she had to correct before it became visible. I looked down at the plastic utensils in my hand, pink, cartoon-themed. "Seriously," I whispered. Haley rolled her eyes. "Don't be so sensitive. Aaron, it's just seating. We had to make room for real couples." Dean snorted into his wine glass. And I sat like a fool at a folding table, next to a 12-year-old discussing Roblox hacks and a girl who sneezed directly into the mashed potatoes. They didn't look at me again. Not until the cake was cut and the venue manager approached holding a clipboard, asking me to verify the payment method for the $4,200 final balance under my name. My name? He showed me the contract, Aaron Fletcher, bold at the top, with a signature that almost matched mine. Almost. "It was your gift, right?" he asked. "The family said you offered." I stared, not even shocked, just empty. Haley was laughing at something across the room. Mom was already halfway through a second glass of white wine. Dean, he was handing out party favors like a mayor on re-election day. I stood up, looked the manager in the eye, asked them, the ones with the real seats. He blinked. "So you're not?" "No," I said, pulling the wristband from my arm and dropping it onto his clipboard. "I'm not paying, and I'm not staying." I walked out. I didn't storm or shout. I didn't cry. I just left, calm, cold, done. But the real revenge that came next, I didn't answer a single call that night. Not when Mom rang twice. Not when Haley sent a voice note saying, "You made things weird." Not even when Dean messaged, "Hope you're proud of yourself." I turned my phone off and left it off. That was the beginning. The next morning, I made a decision. Quiet, not dramatic. I pulled up every shared account I had, ones I'd stupidly set up years ago to help. Haley's phone plan in, Mom's utilities auto pay from my account, Dean's emergency fund for the twins still tied to my backup credit line. I started cutting the cords. First, I froze the credit line, then I removed myself as secondary on Mom's power and internet. I canceled Haley's Hulu subscription and Spotify family. I left no note, no warning, just silence. And oh, how fast they noticed. Haley texted first, "Hey, weird cue, my phone says my plan is suspended." Then Dean, "Mom's freaking out. Wi-Fi is down. Did you mess with something?" Then Mom, classic Mom, "Call me ASAP. Something's wrong with the billing. Or is this more of your mood?" Mood. Because in this family, boundaries were always framed as moods, limits were tantrums, and heaven forbid I ever just stopped giving. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. By that weekend, the guilt machine kicked into high gear. Group messages that started with concern turned into full-blown manipulation. "You're isolating yourself again," Haley wrote, like it was a therapy diagnosis. "Don't punish the whole family because you're feeling left out." Dean followed up with, "You've always been overly sensitive. This isn't the way to handle adult issues." And then the kicker from Mom, "Your father would be heartbroken to see you acting like this." That one almost got me, almost. But then I remembered the last real conversation I'd had with my dad, a month before he passed. He had taken my hand and said, "Don't let them bury your spark. Kiddo, you always were the strong one." He knew, even back then. That Monday, I went to work early, sat in my quiet office, sipped my coffee and exhaled. It felt clean, like I'd finally stopped running a marathon for people who never clapped at the finish line. But the silence didn't last long. Haley showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to see her in full mascara tear-streaked drama, holding a Tupperware of what looked like half-burned lasagna. "Can we talk?" she sniffled. I didn't move. "Are you here to apologize?" She blinked like I'd slapped her. "What?" "No, I mean, not like that. Mom's losing it. Dean's mad, and everyone thinks you're having one of your spirals." "Spirals?" I repeated flatly. Haley pushed past me into the kitchen like it was still 2006, and we shared a dorm. "Look, I know the party sucked for you. Okay, but you didn't have to blow everything up. You just cut everyone off like we're strangers." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I was treated like a stranger. "Oh, come on," she huffed, setting the lasagna on the stove. "It was just a joke. The seating, the payment, Dean said you'd be fine covering it. You always do." That sentence. "You always do." Like it was a fact of the universe, like gravity or oxygen. Aaron handles it. I said nothing, just opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. Haley tried again. You know Mom didn't mean anything by it. She's just stressed. She didn't want to deal with the bill and figured you'd understand. She didn't ask. I said, voice low. She assumed. She lied. Haley's lips thinned. So what, you're just gonna abandon us over a dinner? Over a dinner? The audacity made me laugh, actually laugh, like the air had cracked open. You know what? I said, walking toward the door, if you really think this is about a dinner, then you've missed the entire point. She stood frozen. I gave you $500 last fall when your car got booted. You never paid it back. I covered Mom's electric for 6 months when she forgot how to log in. I co-signed Dean's credit rebuild and got flagged when he missed payments. And all I ever got back were eye rolls and jokes about how dramatic I was when I asked for basic respect. Aaron. No, I cut in. You don't get to Aaron me right now. You showed me exactly where I stand, and I'm done standing there. She left without saying goodbye. By midweek, Mom was calling coworkers. My boss pulled me aside and asked gently if I was going through something. Apparently, my mother had called HR claiming I might be having a breakdown and needed time off. That was her playbook. Undermine, embarrass, frame the victim. I called HR, explained calmly that I was fine and that I'd appreciate it if family members weren't considered valid mental health sources. They understood. But I didn't sleep that night. Because the thing is, when you start withdrawing from a toxic system, it doesn't just let you go. It claws, it spins, it smears. And mine was just getting started. I began getting tagged in passive-aggressive Facebook posts. Haley posted a picture of her burned lasagna with the caption, "Trying to cook like the strong sisters out there, #fail, #family first." Mom shared a quote, "Family is who picks you up when the world turns away." Dean posted nothing, but I got a notification he'd unfriended me on everything. They weren't reaching out to fix things. They were reaching out to control the narrative. That Aaron is dramatic, that Aaron always needed attention, that Aaron was going through something. But no one ever asked what that something might be. Because if they did, they'd have to confront the truth. That I had spent my entire adult life building bridges they kept setting on fire. And now, for the first time, I wasn't running to put the flames out. I was watching, quietly, while they realized I'd stopped carrying the hose. A week passed with radio silence. It was almost eerie. No calls, no texts, just the occasional vague post from Haley or Mom, crafted for maximum guilt and minimum accountability. I started sleeping better, eating real meals. My apartment felt lighter, like I'd opened a window that had been sealed shut for years. But then I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. The penmanship was familiar, slanted, elegant. It smelled faintly of lavender. My Aunt Iris. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she moved to Oregon after a messy fight with my mom over family priorities. She had been the black sheep once. I guess I was now. Inside the envelope, a short note. Aaron, I heard about the dinner. I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to say anything, but there's something you should know about Grandpa's trust. Call me, Iris. My stomach dropped. Grandpa Raymond had passed away 3 years ago. We were close. I was his only grandchild who visited weekly. He used to call me his shadow because I followed him everywhere as a kid. When he died, Mom said there was nothing left, that he'd spent it all on medical bills and the house. I believed her. But now I wasn't so sure. I called Iris that night. She picked up on the first ring. I was hoping you'd call, she said quietly. What do you mean about the trust? I asked. A pause, then your grandfather left equal shares to you, Dean and Haley, but Patricia, she always used Mom's full name when she was angry, claimed you signed your portion over, that you wanted it to go to your siblings because you didn't need it. I felt cold. I never signed anything. I said, I didn't think so, Iris replied. That's why I kept copies. Copies. She sent them to me overnighted. I opened the packet on my kitchen counter with trembling fingers. There it was, a scanned form with my name typed on the signature line. Sloppy, too clean, not even close to my real signature. Next to it, a statement of voluntary forfeiture of inheritance due to financial independence. It read like a fantasy written by someone who'd never actually spoken to me. I forwarded it immediately to a lawyer I knew from work, Sam Berger, a quiet guy with kind eyes and a reputation for cleaning up ugly estate battles. He took one look and whistled. That's not your signature, he said. And even if it was, the notary stamp is off. It's from a business address that doesn't exist anymore. He leaned forward. Aaron, you might have been defrauded. The word hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased, quietly, paper trail style. I asked him what I could do. Well, he said, we can request a formal trust review. It'll trigger a freeze on distributions while we investigate, but I'll be honest, it's going to make your family furious. I looked him dead in the eye. Good. That weekend, while the trust review began, I started going through old paperwork, boxes I'd kept from my 20s, file folders marked just in case, and that's when I found it. A printed copy of an email I'd sent to Mom right after Grandpa's funeral. It read, "Let me know when the lawyer wants me to sign anything. I want to be sure it's fair." Her reply was curt. "Nothing for you to sign. You're not listed. Dad wanted it that way." A lie in writing, dated and time-stamped? I forwarded that to Sam. Then I did something I'd never dared before. I logged into the family cloud drive. It was meant for sharing photos, but I remembered once seeing tax PDFs in the wrong folder. There it was, a 2021 tax return labeled Household Summary, Dean. I clicked. Line item gift received from trust, $43,700. Another for Haley, $38,200. Nothing under my name. I printed them both. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't shaking with fear. I was shaking with rage. That night, I messaged Aunt Iris, told her everything. She offered to testify, said she'd seen the signed form, had been pressured to keep quiet for the sake of family. I wish I'd stood up then, she said. You're standing now, I replied. We made a plan. Sam filed the paperwork Monday morning. Formal dispute, signature fraud, potential misuse of fiduciary power. By noon, Dean was calling me. I didn't answer. By 3, Haley was leaving frantic voicemails. Aaron, please call me. You don't understand what you're doing. You'll ruin everything. At 5, Mom herself showed up at my door. I didn't open it. Instead, I walked to the window and watched her ring the bell 5 times. She looked panicked, flushed, angry. Like someone who'd just realized their scapegoat was missing. Like someone who'd built a house of lies and saw the first floor start to crumble. Later that night, Sam called with an update. They tried to claim you gifted your share out of gratitude, that you were always emotionally unstable and couldn't manage funds. But their documents don't hold, the notary stamp was forged, and the trust lawyer is cooperating. I exhaled slowly. So what happens now? He paused. Now, Aaron, we wait for the fallout. It started with a letter. A simple white envelope, no return address, slid under my door on a Thursday morning like it was ashamed of itself. Inside, a printed note in Dean's blocky handwriting. Please don't take this further. Let's handle it as a family. No apology, no ownership, just a plea to keep quiet. I put the letter on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a cat and went to work. By the end of that day, the trust's legal office had frozen all accounts associated with my grandfather's estate. Sam called to confirm no one could withdraw, move, or hide funds. The investigation was official. Dean tried calling again, then Mom, then Haley. Voicemails stacked up like a guilt tower I had no intention of climbing. The next day, I showed up to my mother's house. Not to make peace, not to explain, but to return something. I stood on the porch with a thick manila folder under my arm. Inside every photocopy, every email, every tax record, every lie. Sam said I didn't have to deliver it myself, but I wanted to look her in the eye when it hit her. Mom answered with puffy eyes and a half smile that didn't reach her face. "Aaron, thank God, come in." I didn't step forward. I handed her the folder. "What's this?" she asked, voice suddenly wary. "Evidence," I said, "of what you and Dean did. The trust lawyer has it already. I just thought you should know what rock bottom looks like." Her face dropped like I'd slapped her. "I don't understand," she stammered. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I interrupted, "and you meant to lie. You meant to erase me. You meant to cash out on the one relationship in this family that actually meant something to me." Her hands trembled. "Your grandfather would be so ashamed of how you're acting." "No," I said, voice low. "He'd be ashamed of you." I turned and walked away. The sound of the storm door shutting behind me more satisfying than any apology she could have offered. The fallout didn't take long. By Monday, Dean had been forced to submit a full financial disclosure. Turns out he'd used his gift to pay down a mortgage, finance a minivan, and according to the line item, Sam found book a family trip to Maui. That last one stung. I'd been told there wasn't enough money for even a small inheritance, and meanwhile, they were drinking cocktails on beaches paid for by the man who called me his legacy. Haley cracked first. She showed up at my door crying, clutching a scarf like it could explain anything. I didn't know the forms were fake. She said, "Dean handled everything. I thought you wanted out. I swear." I stared at her. She looked like a child, lip trembling, mascara smudged, voice pitched just so. "I believed it," she whispered, "because, well, you never really asked for anything." Exactly. I never asked. I just gave, quietly, automatically, like love was a transaction and I didn't have the receipt. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked. "Why didn't you check?" Haley's eyes darted, because if it was true, it made things easier. That sentence stayed with me for days. Easier. It had been easier to pretend I was the distant one, the dramatic one, the bitter one, because if they admitted I'd been giving and giving while they took and took, then they'd have to feel something about it. And none of them wanted that. The final blow came in court. Sam insisted we file for damages, not just my portion of the trust, but restitution for financial misuse, emotional distress, and fraudulent representation. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood up slowly. I loved my grandfather. I began. He taught me how to fish, how to balance a checkbook, how to keep receipts, and he trusted this family to honor his wishes. I turned to look at my mother and brother. They didn't. The courtroom was silent. "We don't get to choose our family," I said, "but we do get to choose what we tolerate, and I'm done tolerating being invisible." When the ruling came down, I was awarded my full third of the trust plus penalties, over $70,000 in total. But the money wasn't the point. The point was the look on their faces when the judge said the words, "intentional misrepresentation." The point was that they finally had to see me not as a wallet, not as a servant, not as an afterthought, but as someone who fought back. Someone who won. They tried to reach out after that. Mom sent a card, "Let's not let money ruin the only family we have." Dean emailed, "We all made mistakes, let's move forward." Haley texted, "Miss you. Things aren't the same without you." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened a new account, transferred every cent. Then I booked a weekend trip, not to Maui, just a cabin by the lake with strong coffee and no Wi-Fi. When I got there, I lit a fire, pulled out a notebook, and wrote 3 words. I am enough. The money came through a week later. $72,000 and some change, direct deposit. Sam called to confirm everything was finalized. Dean had been fined. My mother was no longer authorized to access the estate's remaining funds. Haley, for all her crying, was issued a warning about future misrepresentation. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. There were no balloons, no confetti, no revenge parade, just quiet. For the first time in my adult life, I could breathe without waiting for the next emotional invoice. I started by decluttering physically and emotionally. I donated half my closet, took down family pictures that no longer made me feel safe. I deleted contacts without hesitation. Then, I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned a trip for myself. No compromise, no splitting bills, no guilt. Destination Vermont. I rented a cottage near a trail I'd bookmarked 5 years earlier but never visited because Mom had a bad knee that week and needed help cleaning the gutters. I packed my bag, put on my hiking boots, and left without telling a soul. Not out of spite, out of peace. The cabin was tiny, 1 room, a fireplace, a porch swing that creaked gently in the morning wind. On the second day, I met the owners, an older couple named Lydia and Joe. They'd lived there for 20 years, ran the place themselves, and baked blueberry scones every Friday. Joe was a retired science teacher. Lydia ran a tiny bookstore in town. They invited me over for tea. We sat on their porch, watching squirrels wage territorial wars over pine cones. "You're not from around here," Lydia said kindly. "Nope," I smiled, "just needed a break." From what Joe asked, not unkindly, I hesitated. "My family," I said finally, or maybe just who I was around them. They didn't ask more, just poured me another cup. That evening, I walked the edge of the lake. The water was still. I threw a pebble and watched the ripples stretch farther than I expected. Funny how small things can echo for so long. Back home, the silence held. Haley sent one last message I heard about the court decision. "Hope you're happy." I didn't reply. But I was... Not because I'd won money. Because I'd stopped playing a rigged game. I started saying yes to things that felt good. Pottery classes on Wednesday nights, a book club that didn't care what page you were on, a volunteer shift at the animal shelter where no one asked for money, just kindness. I ran into an old coworker one afternoon at a farmer's market. She blinked at me, said, "You look lighter." I smiled. I think I am. Months passed. Winter came. Then one day I got a letter. No email, no call. A real letter with a floral stamp and shaky handwriting. My grandmother. She lived in a retirement home an hour away, hadn't spoken much after Grandpa died, mostly because Mom always filtered communications through her, claimed she was too tired to talk, too forgetful. The letter read, "Aaron, I heard bits of what happened. I'm sorry. I never agreed with what they did. Your grandfather loved you more than any of them know. Come visit. The tea's still hot. Love, Grandma." I sat with that letter in my lap for an hour. Then I packed a bag, stopped at a bakery, and drove. Grandma was waiting in the lobby, wrapped in a shawl the color of soft moss. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "I always said you were the strong one," she whispered. We sat for hours. She told stories I'd never heard, about how Grandpa insisted I get the cabin in his will, how he'd picked me for power of attorney until Mom talked him out of it for simplicity. She laughed bitterly. He always said Patricia could sell a puddle as a lake. I showed her pictures from my trip. She asked if I'd ever thought about moving. Something clicked. I hadn't, not really, but now I could. With the trust money, I wasn't tied to the city. I wasn't tied to anyone. 3 weeks later, I made the call. I found a fixer-upper near the Vermont cottage. Needed work, needed love. So I gave it both. The paint under my nails, the sore muscles, the quiet nights filled with music I liked and no one to criticize the volume, it all felt right. The family never contacted me again. Not Dean. Not Mom. Not Haley. But every month, like clockwork, Grandma sent a letter. Sometimes funny. Sometimes short. Always real. And I sent one back. The last time I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror before bed, I didn't see the placeholder, the extra, the bank account with legs. I saw Erin. The woman who said no, who said enough, who started again not because she had to, but because she finally could. And one morning, with sunlight pouring through the windows of my little home, I realized I wasn't lonely. I was free. Story 2. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 34 years old, and 6 weeks ago, I learned what my family really thinks of me, and I'll never forget it. The day it all began was hot and stifling, the kind of summer day where the sun burns the air and every breath tastes like dust and sweat. I was on a job site outside of town, laying brick and hauling rebar, same as always. I'd been in construction since I was 18, never went to college, my family needed money, and I was the guy who stepped up. It wasn't the life I dreamed about as a kid. I wanted to design buildings, not break my back helping build them, but someone had to keep the lights on. Someone had to patch the roof, pay the overdue bills, and buy a used car when Mom's broke down again. That someone was always me. Dad used to say, "A real man doesn't complain, he handles things," and I did. I handled everything. My mom, Ellen, quiet and sweet in public, would chime in, "We're a team, Danny, always together," but that team always meant me, doing the heavy lifting literally and figuratively while my younger brother, Ryan, got to chase dreams. He was the entrepreneur, always talking about big ideas, rarely working a full week, but never short on opinions. When Ryan needed a loan for his app, I paid. When Mom and Dad wanted a kitchen remodel but didn't have the money, I took on extra shifts. Even the dog surgery, yeah, that was me too. For years, I told myself it was fine. That's what families do. We help each other, right? But deep down, I kept hoping one day they'd see me, really see me. The son who never said no, the brother who never let them down. I waited for a real thank you, for someone to ask how I was doing, just once. That moment never came. Then came the accident. It was a Friday, and we were rushing to finish a retaining wall before a storm rolled in. I was exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline. When scaffolding gave way under my feet, I heard the crack before I felt it, a sound like lightning in my bones. Then pain, so much pain, and blackness. I woke up in a hospital bed with a shattered leg, 3 broken ribs, and a dislocated shoulder, tubes in my arm, a dull beep echoing in my skull. It felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. For 2 days, I drifted in and out of consciousness. The nurses were kind, a social worker came by, but my family, nothing. No flowers, no visitors, no texts. Finally, I called them myself. Mom picked up, her voice bright. "Danny, good to hear from you. How are you feeling?" "I'm in bad shape," I croaked. "They say I'll need at least 2 surgeries. I can't walk. I don't know when I'll be able to work again." There was a pause, then she sighed. "Well," she said gently, "that's going to be hard on us. We're already stretched thin. I wasn't asking for money. I said, stunned, just wanted to talk. She didn't reply. Then Dad got on the line. You're a burden when you can't work. Daniel, don't be down long, we can't afford it. I lay there, phone to my ear, heart pounding. You think I'm a burden? I whispered. That's not what I meant, he grumbled, but the words had already been said. They echoed louder than the heart monitor beside me. I hung up before I lost it. An hour later, Ryan called. Man, you're really milking this, huh? He joked. I heard you took a tumble classic, Danny. I could have died. I said, Yeah, he laughed. But you didn't. You always make a big deal out of stuff. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't a son to them. Not really. I was a resource, a checkbook, a walking, talking solution to their problems until I couldn't be. That night, I stared at the hospital ceiling for hours, not crying, not angry, just empty, like someone had flipped a switch inside me. 2 weeks later, against medical advice, I signed myself out. I left the hospital on crutches, barely able to move, but I wasn't going back to that house, that life. I didn't tell anyone. My best friend Nate picked me up. He didn't ask questions, just helped me into his truck. He'd always been like that. Solid, loyal. He drove me to a tiny rental on the edge of town. It was drafty and had peeling paint, but it was mine. A place where no one expected anything from me. Yesterday, Nate sent me a video. You'll want to see this, he said. I opened it, not knowing what to expect. It was my parents, standing outside their house. Mom clutched a tissue. Dad looked furious. Ryan stood behind them, arms crossed. They were performing full-on tears, raised voices, moaning to a neighbor about how I abandoned them. He just left, Mom sobbed, after everything we did for him. Dad nodded. We raised him right. We sacrificed so much. They looked like mourning parents at a funeral. Except I wasn't dead. I just stopped letting them use me. That video hit me like a brick wall, not because it hurt, but because it proved everything I already knew. Their grief wasn't about me. It was about losing control, losing access. They were mourning their favorite tool, not their son. And I wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. The first morning in my new place, I woke up to silence. Not the sterile beeping of hospital monitors or the clatter of tools at a construction site, just sunlight filtering through dusty blinds and the hum of a cheap fridge in the kitchen. I sat there on the edge of the bed futon leg in a brace, arms still sore, and realized I didn't feel dread. No obligations, no guilt, no one watching the clock to see when I'd be useful again. It was the first time in years I felt free, and that terrified me. The physical pain was still there. Of course, every movement sent a sharp reminder of what I'd been through, but emotionally I felt blank, like I'd left part of myself behind in that hospital room, with the IV bags and the unanswered phone calls. Nate helped me get settled. He stopped by every few days, bringing groceries, cracking jokes, pretending not to notice when I was too quiet. He was the only person who didn't ask why I left. He just said, "Whatever happened, they blew it. You're not going back, right?" Right. But the call started anyway. Not for my parents at first, they were smarter than that. They deployed the extended family. My Aunt Jean called, sweet voice, full of artificial concern. "Danny, your mom's just heartbroken. She said you left without even saying goodbye. She hasn't stopped crying." Did she mention the part where she called me a burden? Silence. Then the guilt came. "She's your mother, Daniel, no matter what." I hung up. Next was my cousin Rachel. "Hey, just checking in. Your dad seemed really shaken. They're worried sick." "Are they?" I asked if they mentioned coming to the hospital. She changed the subject. By the end of the week, it was a full-on campaign. Friends of the family, old neighbors, even my high school basketball coach. All of them asking why I'd cut off such a loving family. I told Nate about it. "They're rewriting the story," he said. "You're the villain now, the ungrateful son who ran off." It made sense. Their version painted me as selfish, dramatic, unstable. And that meant they didn't have to change a thing. I didn't respond to any more messages, just let them pile up. I kept working through physical therapy, gritting my teeth through every session. I'd heal, I told myself. Then I'd figure out what came next. But healing doesn't come only from exercise and ice packs. It comes from facing the truth even when it hurts. One afternoon, I went through a box of old papers Nate had grabbed from my room before I left, buried under bills and receipts. I found a thick envelope, a folder labeled Loan Docs, Carter Home Equity. Curious, I opened it. What I found made my blood run cold. It was a copy of a second mortgage my parents had taken out on the house, almost 9 years ago. The loan amount was massive. But here's the thing, they'd paid it off early, and the last several payments they'd come from my account. I didn't even remember agreeing to that, but there it was, my bank statement stapled to the back. Suddenly, everything clicked. All the subtle favors, the way they'd coached me into helping with a little bill or covering a surprise fee. It wasn't generosity they'd used me for, it was survival. They'd been hiding this for years. And I'd been funding their secret, thinking I was just being a good son. My hands shook as I went through more paperwork. Car registrations, utility bills, insurance documents. Most of them were in my name, tied to their address. Half the stuff they owned, I'd bought or insured without realizing it. They hadn't just taken advantage of me emotionally, they'd made me financially responsible for their life. And the moment I couldn't keep up, I was disposable. That night, I finally let myself cry, not because of the betrayal, but because of how long I'd accepted it, how deeply I'd wanted to be seen, loved, appreciated, and how easily they'd use that need against me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. So I started documenting everything, every transfer, every payment, every receipt. Nate helped me scan and organize it. Just in case, he said. We both knew what was coming. A week later, a letter arrived in my mailbox, from a law office. It said my parents were requesting repayment for loans they claimed they'd made me over the years, a total that added up to more than I'd made in 3 years of working full-time construction. It was absurd, a fantasy. But it wasn't about the money. It was about punishment. They thought legal threats would scare me back into line. I showed the letter to Nate. His jaw clenched. They really want a war. And that's when I realized, fine. I'd give them one. Not out of spite, not for revenge. But because I was done playing the fool, they wanted me to be the obedient son. Instead, I was going to be the one who finally told the truth. The day I met with my lawyer, the sky was the same dull gray it had been the morning I fell off that scaffold, but this time I wasn't broken, I was focused. Her name was Melissa Brenner, mid-40s, sharp eyes, even sharper questions. Nate found her through a friend, and from the moment she shook my hand, I knew she wasn't the type to be intimidated by anyone, not even my father. I laid everything out, the accident, the hospital stay, the phone call, the silence, then the legal letter. I showed her the scanned receipts, the bank transfers, the paperwork tying me to payments they claimed were gifts but now called debts. Melissa read in silence. Then she leaned back and said, "They've built a trap, but you've been documenting the whole cage." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. We got to work. The plan wasn't revenge, not really. It was protection. I had no interest in dragging anyone through court unless they pushed first, but if they wanted a paper war, I'd bury them in facts. Over the next few days, I stopped answering any messages. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls from my parents, Ryan, even their lawyer, all unanswered. Melissa sent a single letter in response, a formal denial of their claims, along with a neat packet of evidence showing I'd paid more into that house than either of them had in a decade. Included was the bombshell, a record of the mortgage I'd unknowingly helped pay off. Melissa's cover letter was polite, but firm. Any further claims made will be considered harassment. Should this continue, we're prepared to countersue for financial coercion and emotional neglect, supported by medical documentation of Daniel's injuries and lack of familial support. It was a shot across the bow, one I knew they wouldn't take well. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. Until Ryan blew it all up. He'd always been the wild card, the guy who thought he could smooth talk his way through anything, so it didn't surprise me when a friend forwarded me a series of Facebook posts from him. They were public. And they were vicious. He called me unstable, accused me of faking my injuries, claimed I'd stolen from our parents' furniture, appliances, even their car, all things I had either paid for outright or was still making payments on. Then he really overplayed his hand. In a moment of arrogance, Ryan posted screenshots of private texts, real ones, from years ago where I'd offered to cover a mortgage payment or help out when the roof leaked. His caption read, "Proof he agreed it was a loan." But what he didn't post were the timestamps showing they came after I'd already paid, or the messages where Mom had said thank you and you saved us again. Worse for him, in the middle of one post, he accidentally included a line where he admitted they had no paper agreement, just a family understanding. Melissa nearly laughed when she saw it. This is gold. He's undermining their whole legal argument publicly. We took screenshots of everything, saved copies, time-stamped, dated, filed. Ryan had just handed us their defeat. But it wasn't over yet. That weekend, Nate called me. "You home?" "Yeah, why?" He hesitated. "Check your inbox. I sent you something." My heart skipped. It was another video. Same front porch, same house I'd rebuilt by hand. This time, it was Mom and Dad again, but not for show. This wasn't performative grief, it was panic. Mom stood outside, shouting into the phone, pacing like a trapped cat. Dad slammed the door behind him so hard the glass rattled. "We'll lose everything," he barked. "That boy is ruining us." "I told you this would happen," Mom shouted back. "We should have kept him on a leash. Now he's got a lawyer." They didn't know Nate had set up a camera across the street. They didn't know anyone was watching, but now I had proof they weren't heartbroken. They were scared. The truth was catching up to them. I sent the video to Melissa. She didn't even hesitate. We're done playing defense. The next week, we filed a cease and desist for defamation targeting Ryan's social media posts. We sent a new letter to their lawyer detailing our intent to sue if they didn't retract their previous demands and apologize in writing. We didn't expect a settlement, but we got silence. Real, stunned silence. Then came the final blow, a letter from their attorney, carefully worded and full of legal fluff, withdrawing all claims. No apology. But no lawsuit. They'd backed off. They thought it was over. But it wasn't. I didn't reply to their lawyer's withdrawal letter. I didn't need to. The silence spoke louder than anything I could have said, and for once, they were the ones left waiting, wondering, powerless. It would have been easy to stop there. I had what I wanted: freedom, distance, legal protection, but something still gnawed at me. Not anger, not revenge. Closure. Not just for me, but for anyone who'd been pulled into their false narrative. The lies they told weren't just about money. They were about who I was. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to disappear quietly. That's what they counted on for me, to retreat, to stay silent, to keep their secrets. Not this time. So I wrote a letter, not to them, to our extended family, the church community, the people who'd called, guilted, shamed me. It wasn't long, just the truth. I told them what happened, the accident, the hospital stay, the calls that never came. I described the voicemail word for word where my dad told me I was a burden. I explained how I paid their mortgage, covered their debts, supported Ryan, all while being told I was dramatic and ungrateful. Then I attached a copy of the video Nate had taken. No commentary, no accusations, just this is what was said when they thought no one was watching. I sent it quietly, privately, a few people, then a few more. Within days, it spread further than I ever expected. The responses came slowly at first, then faster. Some apologized, others didn't say anything, but unfriended Ryan on social media. A few reached out to Nate, asking questions. It wasn't a public spectacle, it didn't need to be. It was a slow unraveling of the image my parents had spent decades building. And that was enough. The last time I saw them was 4 months later, by accident. I was at the pharmacy, picking up some medication, still limping, still recovering, but walking on my own. Mom spotted me first. She froze. Then Dad came around the corner. His face tightened, but he didn't speak. They looked older, smaller. They didn't say a word, just turned around and left. I didn't follow, didn't wave, just stood there as the automatic doors closed behind them and felt nothing. No bitterness, no triumph. Just stillness. The kind you feel after a storm has passed and everything's been knocked down, but the air is finally clear. A year has passed since then. I'm in a different town now, got a job doing residential inspection, less dangerous than construction, but still hands-on. It pays well. I come home sore, but it's a good kind of sore, honest. I still talk to Nate almost every day. He's family now, the kind that doesn't need a blood test to prove it. There are moments, quiet mornings, late nights where I wonder what might have been, if they'd visited me in the hospital, if they'd just said, "We're sorry," but those moments pass. Because I know now people show you who they are when they think you can't fight back. And my family, they showed me that their love was conditional, that my worth depended on my ability to provide, that when I needed them the most, they saw me as dead weight. But they also taught me something else, something far more important. That walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. That setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you strong. That sometimes choosing yourself is the most radical act of love you can offer. To those who've been through something similar, I see you. I know how hard it is to let go of the people you're told are supposed to love you unconditionally. I know how heavy the guilt can feel. But I also know what's on the other side. Peace. Not the loud, cinematic kind, the quiet, healing kind. The kind where you can breathe again. The kind where you wake up and no longer dread the day. The kind where you finally feel like your life is yours. If you're still stuck in that house emotionally or physically, I hope this story gives you something: clarity, courage, even just the first spark. Because you deserve more than survival. You deserve to live. Story 3. The filtered air in my office always had this crisp, digital chill to it. Cool, constant, just like the hum of the servers tucked into the wall behind me. It was the air of order, control, progress. Nothing like the air in my childhood home, which always felt heavier, somehow soaked with unspoken expectations, scented with my mother's perfume and the stale tang of my father's cigarettes. That day, even the clean office air felt suffocating. Because I was staring at a message that changed everything. It was from my father. "I disown you, all communication through my lawyer." 10 words, sharp, final, Impersonal. I blinked at the screen, waiting for the wave of emotion, rage, disbelief, anything. But all I felt was stillness. Cold, sharp stillness. I read it again. Disown. Like I was a defective machine. Not a son, not a partner in the family business, just deleted. My name is Ethan Grant. I'm 27, and up until that message, I'd spent almost a decade trying to earn the approval of people who only saw me as a lifeline, not a person, just a source of income. Let's rewind a little. When I was 22, just out of college, I was already earning more than my father ever had. I co-founded a small cybersecurity firm with 2 classmates, and we hit gold early, a few government contracts, then a huge licensing deal that exploded our growth. Meanwhile, my dad's old-school equipment rental company, Grant & Sons, was bleeding money. He asked for help, I gave it. I invested, paid off debts, covered payroll more than once, opened a joint account with him so I could keep the books clean. It felt noble then. Now I know it was just naive. That account was the artery they drained for everything: mortgages on both houses, mom's escalating medical bills, my brother Nathan's endless list of failing startups. They'd ask gently at first, with soft guilt and talk of family duty. Eventually, it wasn't even a request. It was a withdrawal. I tried to keep up, not just with the cash, but with the illusion that I was part of something meaningful, that helping would buy me belonging. But I was wrong. The last straw wasn't even the message. It was the brunch the weekend before. We were at their place. The big house in the suburbs paid off. Incidentally, with my investment income, the kitchen smelled like scorched eggs and resentment. Dad sat at the head of the table, Mom dabbing at her eyes like a sad movie extra, and Nathan scrolling through his phone. "Ethan," my dad said, "it's time you put real skin in the game." He meant my company. He wanted me to sell a controlling share, the same company I built, that employed dozens of people, to bail out Nathan. Again. "Dad," I said, "this isn't just my money. Nexus is my life. I can't just liquidate it so Nathan can fix another PR disaster." "Family helps family," he snapped. "You mean I help everyone? You guys just take—" That didn't go over well. Mom started crying harder. Nathan rolled his eyes. Dad slammed his hand on the table and told me I was selfish, said Nathan was the future, and I was just a wallet. I left that day knowing it was over. I knew they'd hate me for saying no. But I didn't expect disownment, a text. And I didn't expect how clear my mind would feel when I read it. I typed a reply. Understood. And then I acted. Within hours, I had my lawyer, Alina Brooks, initiate asset protection. We froze my stake in the joint account. I canceled every automatic payment. They relied on the mortgages, the insurance, the wired funds to Mom's pharmacy, Nathan's rent. It was surgical, cold, necessary. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Ethan," she cried, "what have you done? The accounts, they're empty. Nathan's freaking out. Your father, he's threatening to sue. The whole family is falling apart." I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I said, "You asked for this," or more accurately, Dad did. When he sent that message, "Any concerns can go through my lawyer now." And I hung up. That was the moment the fog lifted, the moment I realized I wasn't the villain. I was the escapee. After I hung up on my mother, I stared at my phone for a long time. No one tells you how quiet the aftermath of a decision like that can be. No applause, no sense of victory, just silence. Empty, loaded silence. But I didn't second-guess myself. I couldn't, not after everything. Instead, I leaned into that silence, let it steady me. Then I went to work. Alina, my lawyer, was methodical, precise. She laid out a plan that was equal parts defense and offense and told me to document everything. Every message, every voicemail, every withdrawal, every payment, every favor. We needed records to prove this wasn't a simple family falling out, this was financial exploitation. We began with the joint account. I had bank records going back years. Most of the deposits were from me, personal transfers, disbursements from my company, bonuses, the withdrawals, mortgage payments, private school tuition for my niece, rent checks with Nathan's name on them, even a bizarre $60,000 payment labeled marketing consulting, which Alina flagged immediately. I'd been covering their lifestyle in its entirety. Even the housekeepers, even the dog groomer. Nathan had never paid a cent of rent on the downtown apartment he bragged about, not once. This isn't just family support, Alina said during one of our meetings. This is a pattern, financial dependence masquerading as kinship. When my father downed me, when he texted those words, he severed the justification behind every dollar I had ever given. And legally, that mattered. But I still wasn't ready for what came next. Because when we pushed back, when we sent a formal letter requesting clarification of their legal claims, they retaliated. With a lawsuit, a full-on civil claim accusing me of embezzling funds from the family business, misappropriation, fraud. They said I siphoned money from Grant & Sons through the joint account, that I'd used family assets for personal gain. It was absurd. Every dollar I'd used came from my own investments, not their failing company. But they had one thing I didn't: legacy. My father had been in business for 35 years. People knew his name. Nathan's lies weren't about logic, they were about reputation. They wanted to ruin mine. And when I got the court papers, I didn't panic. I emailed Alina. "We expected this," she said over the phone, "and we're ready." We countersued. On paper, my case was simple. I'd supported them financially with no formal agreement that those funds were loans or investments. There was no expectation of repayment, but I had receipts, thousands of them. Years of proof, including the disownment message, which clearly stated they no longer wanted any association with me. Then came a break, one that turned everything in our favor. Alina's junior associate, a quiet guy named Leon, found discrepancies in the business books for Grant & Sons, years of them. They'd been cooking the books listing personal expenses as business write-offs, including trips Nathan took to Dubai, business retreats that were actually luxury vacations. And the money, almost all of it came from our joint account, my account. They weren't just draining me. They were laundering my money through their failing business to keep up appearances. It hit me hard. Not because of the money, but because it confirmed something deeper. They never saw me as family. They saw me as a resource, a bank account with emotions they could manipulate. The lawsuit wasn't just about money, it was about control. They wanted to make sure I couldn't walk away without paying the price. But I had something they didn't. Truth. And a video? That video, shaky, barely a minute long, was taken by my assistant Jeremy the day I locked the joint account. He was at the office late, running a software demo, when my father showed up, unannounced, furious, red-faced, demanding to see me. Jeremy recorded the whole thing from the break room. "You ungrateful little punk," my father had yelled. "We built you. You owe us everything." "I owe you nothing," I'd replied. "You used me." "You think we needed you? You were a tool, a wallet with a keyboard." It had felt like venom at the time. Now, it felt like evidence. We added it to our legal file. Alina's team subpoenaed internal records from Grant & Sons. It was a slow, painful process, but each page revealed more rot. Fake vendors, fudged invoices, shell payments to companies registered under Nathan's name. The deeper we dug, the clearer the picture became. My father was drowning, and I'd been the lifeboat. And when I stopped bailing water, he blamed me for the ship sinking. In the middle of it all, I received a text from Nathan. "You know this will destroy Mom, right?" I didn't reply. Because the truth, she wasn't innocent. She'd known, maybe not the extent but enough. Every time I tried to set boundaries, she'd cry, use her health, her pain, her voice. She played the role of peacemaker, but her silence enabled it all. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I blocked their numbers. Not out of rage, but to protect myself. I needed space to breathe, to think, and to prepare. Because the mediation hearing was scheduled, it was time to face them. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning at a downtown legal office, the kind with glass walls and quiet halls that muffled everything except the tension you carried inside. I arrived early, wearing my best navy suit and a calm expression I didn't quite feel. Alina met me in the lobby, files in hand, her voice steady as always. They brought a new lawyer, she told me as we stepped into the elevator. Big firm, expensive, probably trying to scare us. I just nodded. I wasn't scared. I was done being scared. When we entered the room, they were already seated. My father sat stiff-backed, face hard, jaw clenched. My mother was beside him, her hair perfectly styled, eyes red, a practiced kind of red. Nathan leaned back in his chair, smug in a charcoal blazer probably paid for with my money. Their lawyer stood, introduced himself, and gestured to the mediator, a calm, middle-aged woman named Denise with a neutral expression and kind but unreadable eyes. We all sat, silence followed. Then it began. Their lawyer opened first. He spoke with the smooth cadence of someone used to being the smartest person in the room. He painted me as volatile, emotional, said I'd lashed out after a minor disagreement, said I emptied the business account out of spite, that I had always resented Nathan and used my financial contributions as leverage. Then he slid a printed email across the table. It was from 2 years ago, a message from me to my father, asking for more transparency in how the joint account funds were being spent. See, the lawyer said, he was clearly trying to exert control. Control? The word echoed in my ears. I almost laughed. But I didn't say a word, not yet. Alina was ready. When it was our turn, she didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice. She just opened a file folder, calmly and clearly laying out our evidence, the timeline of contributions, the video of my father's outburst at the office, the forensic financial report, the emails from Mr. Henderson, their longtime accountant, showing years of ignored advice and hidden debts. Then she pulled out the disownment message. She read it aloud. I disown you, all communication through my lawyer. The room fell silent. Even Denise, the mediator, blinked. My father shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. That message, Alina said, was the legal and emotional end of any implied obligation or agreement. Ethan's withdrawal from the account came after the severance, a severance initiated by the opposing party. Their lawyer tried to interject, but Alina raised a hand. I'm not done. And then the clincher, Mr. Henderson's sworn affidavit. The final blow. She handed it to the mediator, who began to read. It was devastating in its clarity. Mr. Henderson had outlined not only the financial mismanagement, but his direct warnings to the family. He confirmed that I had personally deposited over 90% of the funds in the joint account, that those funds had been used repeatedly to cover non-business expenses that should never have involved me. And finally, he confirmed that I had asked more than once to separate my finances from the business. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was loaded. My father looked pale. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. and Nathan for once had nothing to say. The mediator closed the file and looked at them. "Unless you have documentation proving the funds were intended as investments or loans," she said carefully, "I strongly recommend dropping this suit. Pursuing it further could result in counterclaims, and depending on the findings, potential criminal investigations." Criminal. That word hung in the air like smoke. My father opened his mouth, closed it, then finally spoke. "He's our son." Not an argument, not a defense, just a pathetic statement, a last attempt to reframe things through the lens of guilt. I met his eyes. "Was I your son when you told me I was disowned?" He didn't answer. The mediation wrapped up within the hour. No settlement, no payout. Just a full legal withdrawal of their claims, and a quiet, devastating conclusion. They lost not just the case, but me. They walked out without looking back. Nathan lingered, just long enough to glance at me, his face twisted with something that looked like confusion, like he still didn't understand how this happened. That's what entitlement does. It blinds you. I didn't say anything to him. Didn't need to. Later that day, I met Alina at a cafe near the courthouse. We shared coffee and quiet satisfaction. Her job was done. Mine, though. Mine was just beginning. Because now, I had to rebuild. Not my company Nexus was thriving. Not my reputation it had survived the fire. But myself? Because the wounds they left, they weren't just financial. They were emotional, spiritual. But scars don't mean weakness. They mean healing. I wish I could tell you that after mediation, everything was easy, that I woke up the next day lighter, healed, free of the pain that had pressed on my chest like a stone for years. But grief doesn't work that way. Especially when you're grieving something you never really had. The family I'd spent most of my life supporting financially, emotionally, even spiritually was gone. Not physically, they still existed, but the version I held on to in my heart, the one I hoped might someday become real, was dead. And mourning it meant facing the truth I'd built a foundation on sand, and now I was starting over. But this time, I was the architect of my own life. The first change was physical. I moved. My old apartment held too many echoes, too many late-night phone calls, too many rushed wire transfers, too many moments where I'd stood by the window wondering if being the dutiful son would ever feel like love. I found a loft on the edge of the city, exposed brick, high ceilings, and a balcony that overlooked the skyline. It wasn't flashy, but it felt honest. It felt mine. David was the first person I invited over. He walked in, looked around, and grinned. "This place feels like you." That meant more than he knew. We cooked pasta that night, drank wine, and sat on the floor, plates on our laps. For the first time in a long while, I laughed, genuinely, without guilt in the background. Therapy helped too. At first, I resisted it. I told myself I didn't need to rehash everything, but the truth was, I'd spent so long stuffing my pain into dark corners that I no longer knew how to name it. My therapist, Dr. Lena, was patient, insightful. She didn't push, just gently unraveled the threads I'd tied myself into. "You were taught love was transactional," she said in our third session, "that your worth was measured by what you could give. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to unlearn it." That hit hard. Because I had been measuring my worth that way, my father's approval, my mother's praise, even Nathan's acceptance, they'd always been tied to money, to usefulness. It took months, but I started to feel the shift. I said no to things without justifying them. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes, expecting a crisis. I even unfollowed extended family members who still liked to post subtle jabs, implying I'd turned my back on kin. They weren't my people anymore, and that was okay. Nexus, my company, entered a new phase. Without the financial drain, I had the bandwidth to reinvest, innovate, expand. I launched a mentorship program for underrepresented tech entrepreneurs, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the emotional space for. Helping others grow without expecting anything in return was healing in its own right. One afternoon, almost a year after the mediation, I received a letter. Not an email, not a voicemail. A real letter, handwritten, on plain stationery. It was from my mother. Just seeing the envelope made my stomach twist. I opened it slowly, carefully, as if the words inside might explode. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. Ethan, we didn't understand what we were doing. I see that now. I hope someday you can forgive us. I miss you, Mom. There was no mention of my father, none of Nathan. Just her. I sat with that letter for a long time. It wasn't an apology, not fully. It didn't acknowledge the specifics, didn't take accountability, but it was something. A flicker? I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready. Forgiveness isn't always a letter in return. Sometimes, it's choosing to move forward without dragging the past behind you. Instead, I burned the letter, watched the paper curl and blacken in a ceramic bowl on my balcony. It wasn't spiteful, it was symbolic. Letting go? David came over later that night. We didn't talk about the letter. He just brought over takeout and queued up a bad movie, and that was enough. He'd become my family in the way that mattered. One day, maybe I'll have a family of my own. Kids, a partner, a dog that sheds on everything, and when I do, I'll build it on honesty, on love that doesn't keep score, on warmth, not guilt, But for now, I'm content. Content knowing I survived. Knowing I reclaimed my life. Knowing I am no longer defined by the people who once tried to own me. A year passed, then two. Time, I'd learned, doesn't erase pain, it refines it, softens the jagged edges. It takes the rawness and turns it into something you can hold without bleeding. I'd settled into a life I never thought I'd have. Peaceful, intentional, quiet. The absence of chaos was louder than I expected at first, but in that quiet, I began to truly hear myself. I kept growing Nexus, not just as a company, but as a culture. We became known for our ethics, our empathy. We made decisions slowly, thoughtfully. We prioritized people over profit. Some thought it naive. But I knew better. Building something good, something lasting takes more than ambition. It takes healing. And I was healing. David and I moved in together. We didn't make a big deal of it. No dramatic speeches. Just one day, his toothbrush was next to mine, and his books were stacked on our coffee table. It felt right. Simple, honest. I didn't think I could trust again, not after what my own family had done, but David never asked me to rush. He simply stayed, and over time, the walls I'd built weren't knocked down. They were disassembled, brick, by kindness. One rainy afternoon, I was speaking at a conference on ethical tech design. Afterward, a woman in her late 20s approached me, nervous, hesitant. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I just wanted to say your story, it helped me. I went no contact with my father last year. He was, like yours, entitled, controlling. Your posts, your talks, they gave me the courage to protect myself." I thanked her. And later, sitting in my hotel room with rain pattering against the glass, I realized something. That this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about impact. I started writing more, speaking more, telling my story not to shame my family, but to help others find their way through their own. The messages poured in. From sons disowned by narcissistic parents. From daughters drained by families that only saw their worth in paychecks. From people who had stayed too long in roles that hollowed them out. The details were different. But the feeling, the same. I gave everything, they gave nothing, I walked away, and now I don't know who I am. I started a support group, quiet at first, anonymous, online. But it grew. People needed to be seen, to say out loud it wasn't me, I wasn't broken, they were just never willing to see me fully. And in helping them, I found pieces of myself. One day, I received another letter. Then this time from Nathan. It was longer than Mom's, less emotional, but more honest. He wrote about the shame he felt, the jealousy, the pressure to be the favorite, how he leaned into it because it was easier than admitting he was lost. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said, I get it now, and I'm sorry. I didn't reply, not immediately. But I didn't burn the letter either. Progress. My parents never wrote again. Last I heard, they'd sold the main house, downsized, retired quietly. I sometimes wonder if my mother thinks of me when she sees a man who looks like me in passing, or if my father ever stares at his phone, debating whether to call. But I don't wait for those answers anymore. Because the past doesn't own me. Not anymore. I walk freely now, and the road ahead is open.